This meeting is being recorded.
Hey everyone, so Brian is,
Sorry.
that's okay. Nicole, you have your hand up already?
Yeah, sorry, Nicole, do you have a question for finance or for Greg and academic?
For Greg, I had sent a message to whoever Lamb PCS is, that on my reminder about the meeting tonight, a parent had posted that they were in the classroom today and in Upper Ellen, nobody was speaking any Spanish.
So thanks so much for reaching out on that. I can't speak to sort of like anecdotal points on that. It's a really important question. You know, we have some classrooms that are on different weeks, whether it's Spanish or English. You know, we have different staff that works with kids at different points. So that's a really, thanks for raising that, but it's tough to really tackle that question without more context, but I do appreciate you raising it.
Yeah, I mean, for context, it was a Spanish week, so.
Again, thank you for raising that. It would be really important to, you just know there's a variety of reasons why you might hear English and a Spanish week for a class. You might have outside providers for kids to receive many different special education services that we offer. We might have deliberate times where we are teaching a child something important in English to continue to make progress. I want to stress we've seen really quite positive growth in ELA and math for upper elementary. And certainly, I don't want to. I wouldn't want to say something about our program just sort of based on anecdotal data, but I do appreciate your reaching out on it.
Thank you. I got a question in the chat here. Greg, I'll let you take a stab at it first. How are you looking at setting goal to close academic gaps across racial lines or across racial groups? I'm a Lamb parent and my daughter is at the South Dakota campus.
That's a super important question, and certainly what animates our team here, honestly, is to close the so-called opportunity gap that exists. We've made significant progress year on year, from 2 years ago to last year, from last year to this year. I'd say it's not going to be anything magical what we've done, but what we're going to continue to do is focus on supporting our teachers, observation and feedback, making sure our curriculum is aligned, making sure that we're preparing kids for, by implementing our Montessori bilingual curriculum, we're going to prepare kids most effectively for middle school. And by making sure that we're aligned, we're working with our teachers both in terms of instructional practices. And honestly, we're always, tackling mindsets. We've been really excited to participate in a year-long DEI training with our teachers, and also through an organization called Simply Lead, and also working with an organization called Kindred to really tackle the equity piece, which I think the sort of mindset piece have a significant impact. But definitely, it's just the day on, day in work of supporting teachers, keeping teachers, because guess what? People actually get even more effective at their jobs the longer they stay with us. When we have amazing teachers, keep them year over year, that benefits kids. So I want to say that a lot of sort of supporting the people you have, keeping great team members, making sure that our curriculum is properly aligned, and then making sure we're teaching it to fidelity, that we're really supporting teachers with robust observation and feedback. But yeah, great question.
I would just want to add to that. One of the things that Greg and I regularly did when we looked at academic data was we disaggregated data to look at all subgroups. And so that was, you can't address something if you're not looking at that data. That was a focus of ours. Uniquely, Lamb was in the position when we looked at the PARCC data from last year. Lamb was in the position of an academic achievement gap demographically, when you look at demographics, that was much smaller than other schools with similar demographic breakdowns. So that's one positive there. And what we saw were Black students at Lamb were performing better in certain subject areas than Black students in citywide. That's one of the reasons why I was and continue to be a strong believer in our ability to ensure that all kids are able to be proficient in reading and math in the next 2 years. I believe in the academic strategy that Greg and Karis have put in place. Was very impressed with the work that was happening in the lower L. And I've seen some of the changes that they've implemented in the upper L to continue to build upon that success. So yes, that does mean we're setting some clear teacher retention goals. That was the question there. Anything else you want to add to that, Greg?
I have another question to ask from the chat that Greg, if you could comment on, and I think it could kind of wrap this up, because while tonight's focus for the board meeting is not on academic data, I do have a question about what's our overall proficiency rates in math and ELA on the most recent map and in fall. And we didn't really prepare this as an academic data presentation tonight. But Greg, if you could just give kind of the off of the top of your head impressions, that would be great. And we will be doing a Charla later this spring again on academics. So.
Yeah, it's basically sort of, steady, positive progress. I mean, honestly, like across classrooms, across different subgroups of kids, across the school. Certainly, like with that exception I mentioned, we're working to improve our upper elementary Spanish approach, and that's a really complex topic. It's a complex issue that is curricular element to there. There's a social emotional culture. As I've said before, like a year ago when we were talking about our shift to our model this year in upper elementary, we really have the conditions in place now with a much stronger program social emotionally and academically for kids, but certainly we're looking for ways to improve. But basically continue positive results. We're taking we are taking the PARCC exam this year, so we'll gain further data. But yeah.
All right, finance and Daryl.
Hey, everyone. Before I start, I just want to say how much I appreciate Lamb having HBCU appreciation and HBCU love today. I happen to be repping my favorite HBCU, which is Morehouse College. So thank you to the Lamb team for doing that, and hopefully you will continue to do that in future years. So let's talk finance and numbers. There are two things that we're going to discuss today, and of course, open up for questions. Number one, Brian will go ahead and review the financial dashboard, and I will talk a little bit about our FY24 budget process. So Brian, go ahead and jump in, please.
Okay. I'm just going to raise a question. Karis has some of the financial dashboard, the critical pages in the executive report. Will you be going over that later? Because I don't need to flash screens up twice for folks, and I can just give kind of a narrative overview.
Yeah, why don't you comment on that when I do the ED report?
Okay. Just a real quick before we get to that, and then we can comment on it more then. The Finance Committee did review the dashboard in full detail, page by page. Generally speaking, we continue to be on track. We did implement this month a first look at a forecast for where things are actually looking to end up at the end of the year. And there are some pressures. We're looking at some bottom line pressures, not all that significant in terms of the total budget, but just want to give recognition to that. Primarily, this is in the area of special education, and to some extent, simply a matter, our special ed enrollment is increasing. To get us there, there's more costs in terms of evaluations and services to be provided. But it's a process, a time-consuming process to get to the point of having a child certified at a certain level special ed, and we don't receive the additional funding until that point. So it should catch up at some point, but we're seeing some bottom line pressures with those expenses hitting prior to getting the actual revenues from the city. We also, just as we get our hands around this newly renovated but old building, getting a better sense as to what the maintenance costs are, and they're running a little bit higher. Somewhat offsetting all of that is overall we've got reduced payroll costs compared to budget, just with a few positions that have not been filled. We budgeted but are trying to manage that closely. So some bottom line pressure, not overly significant, continuing to watch it at an executive level and within the finance committee. Daryl, was there anything you wanted to add at this point? We'll look at the numbers as part of the executive report.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add in terms of the dashboard.
Okay.
Let's jump over to the actual budget process for the upcoming fiscal year. Before I talk about kind of nuts and bolts of the process, I think it's helpful for us to talk a little bit about how LAM goes about developing its budget. And this is largely based on, and I'm just being completely frank and transparent here, some questions that I've gotten as the new treasurer, and just kind of some chatter that's been happening amongst the school community. So a few things. Number one, just want to clarify that it's not the board itself that develops the budget. It's actually LAM's executive committee. So what happens is CARES, in partnership with other members of the executive committee, develop the initial budget. There's a few iterations of that, and that's what's ultimately presented to the board itself, to the finance committee. And during that process, there's a lot of back and forth that happens. It's not a situation where CARES presents the budget and the board just kind of rubber stamps whatever is presented. There's constant back and forth. A lot of questions that are asked, different opportunities and points where we have a chance to get clarity and such. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Secondly, LAM's budget, and in fact, for that matter, no DC charter schools budget is a secret document. That's it's available. The final budget document is available on PCSB's website. But even prior to that, as we're going through this process, the LAM community is certainly part of the process, and having an opportunity to attend these board meetings where information regarding the budget is presented. Also, just want to mention that nothing about the budget process is unilateral. And so again, I just want to reiterate that it is a kind of group project, and ultimately, before it's presented to PCSB, in this case, July 5th, there's constant conversation about what that final product, if you will look like. So having said that, there's a couple of key dates that I wanted to mention to everyone. First of all, the initial draft of the budget will be presented to the board. Thank you for putting the graphic up. The initial draft will be prepared by April, in time for the May board meeting, and then with the goal of the board voting by June. And again, if everything goes well, the final budget will be presented to PCSB by its July 5th deadline. And with that, I will open it up to any the questions that folks in the community might have.
I've got a great one in the chat. How will the closing of the South Dakota facility alter the budget? at the end of this year. Brian, if you want to give us a recap of that.
Yeah, the short of it, and I'm going to layer it in because we've been planning for this for a long time. That will reduce right up front our net rent expense. And I emphasize net because since we moved into 14th Street, we've been subleasing some of that space to Sojourner Truth. So we will have a reduction immediately starting July 1 in that rent expense, both in terms of expense and in terms of cash flow. What we are expecting, though, is that cash turns around and goes into bond payments. The bond that financed the acquisition of 14th Street is interest only payments through this year. We begin principal payments next year. So that all was very much intentional in that regard. There will be some additional savings beyond the rent expense, but that's a primary one. Just from administrative standpoint, there'll be some efficiencies in consolidating fully into one building. But in terms of instructional costs, that should remain very much the same. We are bringing the 3 classes into 14th Street in whole and fully staffed. We'll actually have some additional expenses, but working with the operations team, thank you very much, Maria Jose and Brad. We've come up with a plan for bringing those classes in at relatively small configuration costs, if you will, building wise, to get them here.
Paris, are there any other questions in the chat?
I've got one question here about how much is the reduction in rent expenses?
The net rent is $352,000 a year. And just for full disclosure relative to what I've been saying, when we begin principal payments, they are actually in excess of $600,000 a year. But keep in mind, we are also increasing our enrollment, again, part of the overall planning process for financing the building. Assume that financially we would be in a position where cash flow made sense once we fully consolidated.
Akeem, I have 2 questions about the possibility of transportation from South Dakota that I'd like to address. And this has long been a topic of discussion, long been something that we've considered. We have done multiple stabs at seeing how we could make this work, and we just don't see it as a financially feasible thing that we can do, especially right now. We've thought about it every single way that we can. We've also been honest with our families that South Dakota was a temporary situation and that transportation was unlikely. We know that it would be wonderful to do, and we know it would be a great service to our community. It's just too expensive and not sustainable at this time.
I see Nicole has her hand up. Nicole?
I mean, I've been on the bus team for a long time. I just don't know how we can say we're being equitable and how we're inviting more low-income students to our school if they're not going to be able to get to our school. It makes me sad.
I know.
This is Maia. I just wanted to also chime in here. I'm a parent with a daughter at South Dakota, and I believe that there are many parents that would be willing to subsidize. I'm one of them in terms of making it more financially viable. And so I don't think it's right to completely just abandon it if we haven't determined whether or not there are other parents that would subsidize and provide volunteer support. So I feel really strongly about not abandoning exploration. And I also understand and respect that it has been a long journey of up and down, well before my time as a parent at Lamb, around trying to figure out transportation. But there are schools that have figured it out. And if we truly believe in retaining families who don't live in Upper Northwest, which is a very affluent part of the city, I do think we shouldn't abandon this, and we should think about, like, what are the equity investments we're going to make in our school community. The fact that there are only 25 families that I'm aware of that would qualify for equitable access in our community of over 500 families is jarring to me as someone who works in public education. And I think we can do better. And I think we're going to lose families in South Dakota if we don't at least attempt and try to do better.
Thank you. I just want to second that as another parent that would subsidize. And I hate doing fundraisers, but I would volunteer myself to help with that kind of fundraiser. And I would like to think that we could raise the money from our parent community. It's my first year at Lamb, so I don't know if this was attempted in the past, but I know other families as well who would be willing to, and I know families that we are going to lose. We are going to lose them if we can't do this. And I just think that this action is speaking very loudly about what the school is willing to do for diversity and equity. So sorry, I also have a toddler here, but I just wanted to put that behind. I just wanted to add that voice as well.
I'd also like to second that. I appreciate, everything that I know the school has done. As you said, like, you've gone over it and over it. But I think that, me in the community, and I've only been at Lamb for 2 years, but it's never been presented to us as a community. Like, what can we do? Like, can we do fundraisers? Like, maybe it's the scope is so much larger than that, but it does feel that if we are committing to diversity in our schools, socioeconomic and racial, that we have to be able to support the families getting there. DC is a hard city to commute in. And if we can support them with transportation, I also second that. I would love to be a part of that initiative. I mean, I just hope that, I hope that we don't just close the door on it. I understand that, we've tried to find every way, but I guess I'd love to see why, almost like I'd love to see the numbers, like, why won't it work? Because we'll lose families.
Especially when we're considering $700 for a turf field.
Exactly. To me, it feels like a priority.
Sorry, this is Doreen, and I just wanted to also lend my support in this. I think this is a huge issue about equity. And I know that this has been talked about, but with a large group of parents, and it seemed like it was nearly worked out. But I also understand that in the budget is money to renovate the kitchen and to do this food plan. But I don't know why that is taking first priority, for example, over a shuttle, which we could put the money towards the shuttle, and that would increase our availability for families to get to our campus. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to do during the budget process was to do this in an open and public way. I had talked to some members of the board about having the budget meeting in person. I want to figure out a way to do that once it's presented, but these are great conversations for when the budget is presented to the board, and we'll get into that then. But I do want to say this about the shuttle idea. I am sympathetic and understand where parents who have expressed their thoughts on that here are landing on that. I will say that before this role, I worked at City Council, and one thing that we saw as a city was that the city funded a shuttle for 2 schools in the Capitol Hill corridor, Watkins and Peabody. The shuttle literally just went back and forth between Watkins and Peabody. The argument that those parents said was that it would increase diversity and social economic status in the school. That never panned out. In fact, the school got wider and richer, because ultimately what had to happen was parents would still have to get their kid to one of those sites to go to the other, to get to the shuttle to go to the other school. And the city was subsidizing a shuttle that wasn't used for, that only supported higher income Capitol Hill families. It did not increase their diversity numbers. It did not increase their social economic numbers. And what we constantly heard at council was other students who were trying to navigate violence, asking for the same shuttle. But the city never did that. And it wasn't until the mayor pulled it out of the budget after a number of students protested, saying, well, why are these wealthy families getting a shuttle and we're not? And we're actually the ones who have to go through violent neighborhoods in order to get to school. It wasn't until that happened that the shuttle was taken out. I get the logic around saying that it would help diversity. I'm curious to see if that is actually the case, because it certainly wasn't the case with the Capitol Hill shuttle. But that is a conversation that I think is best served once we have the budget in place, and we can have that discussion there. But I'm going to take the next 2 comments from Erica and then Dominique. But we really do have to. We've got a packed agenda, and we also have to get to our closed session. So I'm going to take the next 2 comments from Erica and then Dominique. But Tanisha, can you please just put it in the chat, because I got to keep us moving.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just really quick, just two quick things on the shuttle. There actually was a plan during when the pandemic came into being for a shuttle from South Dakota, so it was already priced out and planned, and the information was sent out by the school, but then the pandemic hit. So there is a
It was
precedent.
a 1-year plan that was only
But
for
I'm
families
saying-
that were split.
There is something that can be looked at. And then my second comment is just that I don't think that the scenario that you're talking about on Capitol Hill is really kind of apples and oranges to what we're looking at. But I guess I just hope that this discussion can continue, because we've been trying to get a shuttle for quite some time. This is more just for context for the parents that just spoke up that are newer. Thank you.
Yeah, that shuttle was just for that 1 year, and it was not organized. It wasn't going to be fully organized by the school. It was a shuttle service that would be self-organized by the parents, and they would be paying the shuttle service directly. What we are talking about is the cost that the school would incur is the subsidization that we would need to do in order to make it affordable for families. And that can get very expensive very quickly. So, but I see comments about, you know, and Akeem's comment that we will discuss it more in the budget meeting. So we will present more information about the situation at the budget meeting.
Sorry, I just to respond to you, Akeem, I live on Capitol Hill, and I think your analogy is really a little bit incorrect. I also think it's very much, as Erica said, apples to oranges in comparing the two. I mean, I have been talking about shuttle bus for 5 years. It's actually a really depressing topic because it just seems like every year it gets brought up and dismissed. And I understand that, diversity is really important. For me, it's really important that my kids go to LIM because I am Central American and because we do speak Spanish. And that's why I drive 30 minutes every day. But I've seen over the 5 years that this has been discussed, families leave over and over and over again, people who love LIM would have loved to stay. And just telling you the reality is the school is getting wider. I'm talking about LAM PCS and richer because only people from Upper Northwest or only people who can drive across the city can actually attend. I think it's a bit tongue in cheek to give this equitable access preference when it's quite clear that almost no one can get to LAM. The houses surrounding LAM cost millions of dollars and they're not available for most people. There's not like a easy apartment rentals. And frankly, people shouldn't have to move to attend school. So I just really think that, sure, a turf field is nice, but that $700 would go a long way towards helping people get to school. I spend 2 hours a day driving my kids back and forth. And I'm really fortunate that my husband and I make a lot of sacrifice to make that happen. But the reality is most people can't. And it seems pretty sad to me that the priorities are what they are. And I don't think that anyone's expecting a free ride necessarily, but if the school even were to organize something which would allow Ariba to fundraise or maybe some method to help us get to school, it would be really wonderful. And it would be really more in keeping with LAM than having a fancy kitchen. All right, that's all I have to say.
I'm going to go ahead and respond, but we're going to move on. Like I said, open to the idea, happy to have the discussion at when we do the budget. I don't think it's this is something that equity and equitable access is something that's very important to me, and making sure that the school is accessible to all kids. It's something that's very important to me. It's why I wrote the legislation that created the equitable access, because there were a number of schools that just weren't doing their fair share when it came to serving all kids. So this has been part of everything that I've done in my career. Happy to look at it, and we'll continue to have that discussion when the budget is presented. Daryl, anything else? Brian, anything else?
No, we're good. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go on to operations. That's Brad.
Thank you. I'm not sure how much I can speak to since a lot of it is contained in the executive director report. I mean, Karis, can I toot our horn on a couple of issues?
You go right ahead and I'll just skip over those parts if I have them in my report.
Yay, we've been renewed, our 20-year renewal for our public charter was approved at the last meeting of the Public Charter School Board. Karis and Greg and myself, we attended and presented to the board, which was very successful and very happy. The school itself has been plugging along in compliance with safety standards and the basic building operations data and compliance. I think the really great thing that LAM has done recently is engaged the community in the lottery outreach fair, which happened this past weekend. Fortunately, I've been packing up my house for a move, and I was not able to attend. And I'm hoping that Maria Jose maybe could comment on how the fair went. And we are looking forward to completing several of the capital improvements that were originally planned for the 14th Street facility, including fitting out the rest of the kitchen, fixing the athletic field on the north side of the site. And also the basement classrooms, of course, that are going to accommodate the remaining students coming over from South Dakota. If I can answer any questions, but I'd also really encourage Maria Jose to talk about how the fair went last weekend.
Thank you. I'll do that really quick. I really want to highlight the amazing work our family services team did under Claudia's leadership. This was the first time ever we have done a fair like this. Not even the snow could stop us. We had around a dozen of organizations engaged there. And the fair was a great success. And the most important part was that we were able to engage very key community organizations in this project and start establishing relationships that are going to help us in the future. We had the executive director of the mayor's office for Latino affairs there. We had radio personalities. We have all types of great representation. And we're hoping, of course, that this will increase representation of underserved communities that apply to the lottery. Several people did register for My School DC on site, which was really the main purpose for the event. So it was a great success. And we hope that will be the first of many fairs that to come.
Any questions for Maria Jose or Brad? All right, moving along. There's no governance committee report unless Alan, do you want to give the governance committee? No, there's no governance committee report. We should chat in our closed session as a board about getting that committee back up and running. So we'll add that. On to the ED report.
All right. We've already discussed much of this, so I will be brief. We are working right now on finishing up the strategic plan, so I will bring back in the strategic plan slides into the ED report once that is complete. But everyone should be excited to know that the board is nearing completion on that and getting ready to set that out in front of us. We don't have any proposals tonight, and I'll talk a little bit more at length in this report about the equitable access preference and how we will be using that. So we have completed winter map assessments. All classrooms saw better winter to winter scores if you compare seasons, which Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually a more accurate way to do that. Primary and lower elementary are showing gains that we expected. Upper elementary saw significant improvements in ELA and math, and upper elementary Spanish is a target for improvement. We are working hard on that. Did not see the gains there that we had hoped to see, so we are working on that. I wanted to update this slide briefly. I will be sending out the report soon on the climate survey. I'm sorry that report is later than I meant to do, but when I went back and looked at some data, there was a fault in the original school, the student responses. There was an error in the link there, so I updated it and got many more student responses. So these are our domain scores overall, still solid. And particularly excited about the new DEI domain and that all groups have met that baseline goal of 3.5 on that. We're digging a little deeper on that too. Financial dashboard, as Brian explained, we are all good. That net loss, 61,000 right now, with a projected net loss of about what's the projected right now, Brian? It's a little more than the 652,000.
The budget was 652. The forecast is in the 700 range.
700 range. Okay. But we still have, a few months to mitigate that as much as we can. Did you want to talk about any numbers here, or did you cover them pretty much?
Pretty much covered, but while people are looking at, because there's a lot of data there, again, the focal point was just we're running somewhat behind budget in terms of the enrollment revenue, primarily relating to the SPED funding. Expenses, I had noted that we're running over somewhat relation to SPED contracting for evaluations and support services, and with maintenance of the building, somewhat offset by some budget savings with vacancies in the personnel area.
Kate, you have a question?
Yeah, it's just a question about hiring and personnel. Is that something I can bring up here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to ask two questions regarding staffing, just because I recently heard that Assistant Principal Michelle Mangan's contract is not going to be renewed next year. And I just wanted to understand how the school is going to fill that incredible gap that she's going to leave in the administration. Because, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, and I've heard this from a lot of folks, but I mean, Michelle was one of the reasons that we decided to stay at Lamb through COVID, because she was such an incredible resource for us when it felt like everything was going wrong. So I'm really passionate about, trying to understand, I guess, this decision, how the school is making it, who's making these decisions, and then, what are we going to do in her absence? Because I'm not sure that anyone else is going to be able to fill her shoes. And especially when we're touting that there's improved test scores, I'm really wondering, which is very much within Michelle's scope of work. I'm wondering, what justification for her departure. I know you can't talk about this here, and I understand that the board potentially maybe doesn't have any role in this, but I think that the community is going to want to hear more about this decision and have a real conversation about it. Thanks.
Thank you for that. You are correct. We will not be commenting about any individual employment issues, and the board's role in this is working with us on the staffing structure and the budget aspect of it. But we won't be discussing that tonight. But we can discuss, or at least report out in the future, our staffing model for next year. All right. Let me get my cursor in the right place. Sorry. There we go. All right. This is our operations dashboard with safety operations and compliance. Oh, I'm sorry. I see more questions. Doreen?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to reiterate and support what Kate said. And I understand that you can't talk about the reasons behind someone leaving. That's actually not my question. Is more, what's the plan that you have? And I hope that you have one for when Michelle leaves. She's been a complete, I just want to reiterate that she's been a complete support to my family. She's a strong reason why we're there, in addition to the teachers. And I honestly also don't see how we can fill this hole. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Matthias?
Yes, same. I mean, I want to second what Doreen and Kate said. Michelle has been great. We've seen her in action for many years. She's not only on the logistics, but she speaks Spanish in a context where many of the directors at LAM don't. I'm a Spanish speaker. We are Spanish speaking at my house. And I wanted to follow up with you, Caris, and ask you, so you mentioned that you are willing to discuss this further in some other instance. When will that be? In which instance? Will this be a charla? And when? Thank you.
Yep. I don't know yet, but I appreciate the question. I will work on that with Akeem and we will figure out what is appropriate. There is a person with their hand raised, but the only word on the screen is iPhone. So.
Oh, I don't know. That might be me. It's Eileen Hughes. I just want to reiterate the concern, and I want to make sure that the board hears parents loud and clear about this concern. Michelle is the only administrator who really communicates with parents. She is so vital to the school, and I think the board should feel a great concern about parents pulling their children from LAM. That is how you get your per pupil funding. There are families that just adore the school because of Michelle. And I know tonight's not the right time to talk about it, but I think the board should be very concerned about things right now. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Back to the ED report. You can see that we are on track with our fire drills, safety drills, compliance with the BZA order, other compliance with OSCE. Our in-seat attendance is at above 90% over the whole year, which is very positive, especially in relation to the rest of the city. And we continue to improve on that. Also improving on our own attendance policies and procedures. Those are getting much more smoothed out. I hope that that has been all of the experience of the parents on the call. So yes, our 20-year charter renewal was approved by the PCSB. Kitchen, field, and basement projects are on track. Planning for next year has begun, including moving the 3 classrooms from South Dakota, completion of the admin salary structure, which was a 3-year salary structure process. And then we're also working on our food program for next year. More details of that to come later. Highlights for family engagement. Our family services has been laser focused on lottery outreach. And I'm sure that many of you have seen bus advertising. We've been working with multiple education fairs, our ambassador program, and of course our own community fair that Maria Jose spoke of. Here are some of the partner organizations that participated in that. It was super positive, and it was a really great time to build the relationships with these organizations. So equitable access preference. So going back to this. The equitable access preference was put into place for last year. Schools have to complete an application and get that accepted, ensuring that they are thinking about their services to students, all students, not just students at risk. We did not apply last year. We did apply this year. We are one of 14 charter schools and 12 PCSB schools, DCPS schools that are using the equitable access preference. There are 2 ways to use it. One is to set aside a percentage of your seats to be filled in the first round of the lottery. The other option is to set aside a number of seats. And if you do not fill those seats are held open for you to pull people off your wait list. So for us in particular, this was recommended by the lottery staff, because if we did not fill all of those seats, all of them would be at the pre-K3 level. Families may not have that designation. We can then contact the wait list and inform them that if they meet these criteria, they can take these steps, get the designation, and then move to the top of the wait list, where then we can admit them. So we are ensuring that we are filling those seats with students who are at risk. And we have decided to designate 16 of our pre-K 3 seats. We will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 seats open at pre-K 3. Usually about half of those are filled with siblings of current students. So of the remaining, a little less than half would be designated for students at risk. This was the number that my school DC lottery staff recommended to us. It wasn't a mandate or anything. They just said, hey, given your school and how this has worked with the other schools the first year around, this seems like a good amount to do. And so that's what we did. Raising our profile, we are continuing to work with the Charter School Alliance and PCSB to help guide the development of the accountability framework, which is replacing the PMF. We are sending 4 teachers to the AMS conference and 4 to the Congreso Montessori in Mexico. And I'll be presenting at AMS. And I'm also working with AMS with their Innovation Fellowship think tank on the future of Montessori. Hey,
Karis, sorry, I hate to interrupt you. I've got the fire alarm going off in my building, so I'm going to hand the chair over to Amanda for the time being. I'm going to go see what's going on, and I'll be back. Hopefully my stuff didn't burn down.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to the questions in the comment right now, questions in chat right now. More detailed climate survey data. Yes, I am so sorry that that has been delayed. I meant to get that out much sooner, and I just need to put some of it into a report, and then I will also give access to the data dashboard so you can go in and manipulate some of the data yourselves. You can expect that in the next week or two. I'm seeing lots of requests about the shuttle, so we will I'll talk with Akeem about how best we can present kind of our numbers and needs and to the community to see what we can do about that. And the rest are comments considering Michelle. I will take those into consideration and work with Akeem on how to address those. So. All right. So Amanda, I believe, let's see.
Hi, Karis. Thank you. I don't have Akeem's run of show because I don't think we anticipated a fire alarm. So you might have to prompt me a little bit. I would say I thank all the parents for their input this evening. I know I am personally deeply grateful to all the administrators and teachers who helped see me and my family, particularly through COVID. And I really appreciate and understand the extraordinary sort of appreciation for and commitment to Michelle and all that she has done for LAM. And I know there'll be an opportunity for sort of further exploration of what Karis and the broader leadership team know that they sort of need to build with new positions and new investments now that LAM is consolidated in one campus. And I personally also look forward to learning more about the busing and the costs and logistics of what's required there. I understand that it has been looked at many ways for many years. So thank you in advance for those conversations. What should we do next?
Well, I do see that there are other questions, but we also have, the board needs to move into closed session for the activity that we have for that. So I'm going to ask those people who still have questions or comments to please email them to me. I will share them with the board. Or you can.
Paris, just real quick. My concern is that no one is seeing our comments and that we don't have, I wanted to ask the board about the feedback at LAM PCS that was dismantled and how we can still reach out to the board today. So sorry, this is very important to the exactly what you're just saying. This is how will the comments be shared overall?
So the decision to move the comments to the hosts was done because the comments were increasingly hijacking the meetings and taking us in directions that made it really hard to control a meeting and get out the information that we were trying to share. So this helped us keep focus on what we needed to do and keep track of the time and make sure that things ended on time. Greg?
So Karis, can you just confirm for everybody that the comments during this meeting will be sent around to the board? So the board will have full transparency into all comments. Yeah.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I think it would also be helpful for parents to see the comments too, as someone who's participated in like DEI, Charla's, like when we can't communicate with each other, how can we collaborate and make things happen? As a parent who wants to organize parents around this transportation, I don't have a way to reach people because I don't know their full names and I didn't see any of their comments. So it would just be helpful to share widely since it is a public meeting to all of us.
Sorry, I just feel compelled to chime in here for a second. I'm seeing a lot of different, I don't see the parent comments, but I'm hearing from a lot of different concerned community members about different topics. And I don't feel like we're ready to move on to the next items. I feel like we've got to air stuff out. And I definitely I think there's issues we need to discuss or designate another time. I want to make sure that this community is inclusive, that we are really just building community. And if there's any way I can just try to advocate for the fact that we have a lot of different comments. I want to make sure people's voices are heard in this venue, in this setting, or that there's a real designation of another time to do so. I think there's important things that it's better to discuss than not to discuss.
Thank you for not shying away from the conversation, Greg.
So I'm gonna move right now that we get the comments from the chat, just for the sake of time. I think the suggestion about further exploration is fine. We'll get the comments from the chat. We will determine the appropriate way to share those as we go forward on the relevant issues. And it sounds like we already have a commitment both in the ongoing budget process to discuss the organizational design, as well as in the upcoming, it sounds like Karis committed to a conversation around busing and to share the relevant information there. So I'm going to move that we wrap up this part of the board meeting, given those commitments. And I guess I'm looking for someone to move and someone to second if other board members feel like that's appropriate.
Amanda, I'm sorry, this is Nicole Harkett. There's only 3 comments left and I would just love to hear what those people want to say. Like, previously everybody's been able to say whatever they wanted to say in our board meetings.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, Nicole, I don't have access to that. I can't even see the 3, so I didn't have transparency.
Oh, okay. So it's
into
Christina
that.
Marks, Angela Pearson, and somebody with an iPhone who's had their phone hand up for a while.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have administrator access on this. Okay, let's do that. Great idea. Thanks, Nicole.
My comment was, it was really like I didn't send anything in the chat. And you guys want to close this, so I can't, but I would love for it to be shared like on ParentSquare, something that we know where people have access to, the board members' emails, so we can share with the board our concerns over what is happening right now. Because I didn't type anything into the chat, but I have some real concerns about Michelle's departure. And I would like to share those, and I would like us to have a way to know that we're going to be able to do that like by the end of the week.
Great. That's very helpful feedback. I think in the past we've discussed either a single board email or a single point of contact on the board for parent feedback. I don't know what was resolved on that, but we'll get clear on that soon and make that available to folks. There's a lot that the board can't do given our responsibilities and our role and the leadership and administration of LAM and their responsibilities and role. But we'll make sure that that pathway is clear.
So
Thank
my
you.
comment goes, this is Angela, my comment goes along with that, and it's something I just said, but we had an email address that was it was feedback@lampcs.org that we were able to email the board on, and it was just recently that I realized that it no longer exists. And parents were promised that a number of years ago, so I would just, I think you've already heard it at this point, we want to be able to, reach out directly. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Tanasha. I know this is kind of like beating a dead horse, but I just wanted to make this comment because it may be beneficial as preparation prior to the follow-up discussion about transportation. A lot of what we talked about tonight was in regards to the budget and the financing and the cost. But as I am a parent of a South Dakota student, hopefully soon to be students, right? And so I'm in favor of it. And I've been at birthday parties where it's been discussions about what can we do. But one of the comments I've always made is I imagine that it's somewhat of a liability issue or a potential, responsibility, right, for the school for pickup and drop off to be sure that parents are on the other end when the kids come home, that somebody's there to pick up the student. So one of the things that may be of a good discussion from the school perspective, whether it be the board or the school, I don't know who's ultimately makes that call, is if you can't support financially, what support can you offer, right? If parents choose to band together and say, hey, here's the monthly cost for the shuttle. If you're interested, here's your portion of that bill. How, as a parent, can we be confident in saying, if I put my child on the shuttle, the school is going to receive the shuttle, the school is going to get the child back. So if you can't support financially, can we have the conversation about what can you do and what can you not do, so that as parents, we can then, if necessary, make decisions that are important or in the best interest of us, understanding that we may not have the financial backing of the school.
Yeah, that's a very clear request. Sorry, go ahead, Karis.
Yeah, and we already work with Casa Lala and their shuttle picking up kids after school. So we are happy to receive a shuttle organized by parents.
And so if there can be conversations about what that looks like, what needs to be in place from, I know Casa Lala is a school, but what would we need to have in place that LAM would be comfortable in supporting that effort, an external effort? Being as though, we're not a school, we have no clue what you're looking for. Because I get it, it's a liability issue. I get it if it's not completely supported and organized and ran by the school, that there is a liability issue. But I think, as you've heard, and it continues to sound like a dead horse for many years, is that there is an interest. And I don't think the finances is the only concern of all parents.
Hey, let me offer a suggestion. I'm back. There was a fire, but the fire department came and dealt with it. My understanding is that Washington Latin and Mundo Verde have a shuttle. Karis, why don't you go talk to, they do not have a shuttle?
Mundo Verde does not have shuttles anymore. I don't know about Washington Latin. I know of Breakthrough has a shuttle, but it's from their old location to their new location, and it's a special.
Yeah.
But Mundo Verde ended theirs.
Okay, we'll go and look and talk with other school leaders. Karis can talk to her peers who have dealt with this, and the good thing is they are still in the budget formulation process. And when we get to the budget, I think that's the appropriate time to have this type of robust discussion. But I am mindful of the time, and I know we've got Alan here who needs to talk to us in the closed session. And I got some very important things that as a board, we have to discuss in our exec session. So I am going to go ahead and ask for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Is this second? Motion dies unless it is seconded by a board member.
Second.
Thank you, Amanda. All in favor of going into closed session, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. I want to thank you, parents, for coming and the robust discussion that we've had. If you can please hop off the Zoom now, we're going to have to go into closed session.